So thank you very much, Hamoud, also Marvin, Pete Hine, Emerson, and also Espen as well. The team are here. We've managed to bring across some experts who have been working within the field of actually deploying this. The majority of the team have, but we thought we'd bring back a variety of guests. So I'd like to introduce back to you Namrata, who is based out in Asia. She has been working with a number of customers in Asia on deploying cloud scale analytics. We also have Emerson, who has been interfacing quite heavily into a number of chief data officers and CTOs in really understanding the space. Pete Hine, based in EMEA, again, a thought leader within that data mesh space, but equally working very closely with us on deployment into West Europe. So given we've got a number of kind of questions in here, what I would love to see is further questions in the Learn TV chat, or obviously on the YouTube chat as well. I'm trying to look at both sides as we go. So please place your questions there. I think to kind of start us off as we go at this moment in time, I'm going to just focus on Namrata. Namrata, you've been involved in a number of kind of engagements in APAC. What are you seeing with customers? Why are they looking at kind of cloud scale analytics, and how are you potentially taking them through some of the migration pieces on how do you move customers to it? I know you've been doing some great stuff there.
Yeah. So one of the customers that I've been working on, they have their Hortonworks platform on Azure IS, and which was coming to end of life, and they were exploring options to modernize the platform. Now, in that particular case, the directive from the CTO office was to pivot to a domain-driven design for applications, right? And from a bank strategy, that's a banking engagement, so from a strategy perspective, they wanted to adopt the microservices architecture. Now, the challenge that the bank was facing was how to bring domain driven design and product thinking to data and analytics, right? And that's where we started discussing cloud scale analytics with the customer. So that was the starting point for this particular customer, because that directive came from the CTO. Otherwise, there are a couple of other customers as well, where they're facing challenges in terms of having a very complex data landscape and everything is centralized. We've heard through this presentation about how we can decentralize the entire data landscape. So they have a lot of data sources, a lot of structured data, unstructured data, and they have a lot of business units, and each of them, they want their own isolated environment. So these
Yeah.
are the triggering points. So that's the other customer requirements, so where we propose cloud scale analytics as well. So these are the two areas where I've come across, really.
Great. Awesome. So then picking up on the question, I'm going to go to Emerson and Pete Hine, if I may. The key question I've got from Alexandra in the chat is, what are the key challenges you see in using a data mesh structure versus a more centralized approach? Emerson, do you have any viewpoint on that first? And then I'll go to Pete Hine.
Sure. So the question was, what are the challenges to go decentralized coming off from a centralized implementation?
Yeah. What are the key challenges you see in using? I've lost the question now. In using data mesh versus a more centralized approach.
Right. So in terms of challenges, what I see is for a lot of the organizations who are not structured yet, for having a proper domain owners, for example, they don't have the structure that supports like the people that will support data mesh. And so how we're trying to solve that is, how do we actually be in a transition phase from a centralized to a decentralized? So we have clients right now who don't have the organizational structure yet, but then we're starting building the domains. And the reason for this is, say, for example, the centralized team, the CDO office, or the shared services team, they are the ones who are building these projects. So what they're doing right now in terms of transitioning is they enable the ingestion of the data into the raw zones, right? For example, or the bronze zones, the conform layer. They are still able to build the projects for the different domains, but what they're doing is now they're landing all this data in the proper domain, in the proper tenant, and what have you, right? So what happens now is these different lines of businesses can enable and use our partners to kind of work with them in building the projects, right? So rather than thinking about having partners on a bigger shared services implementation, it's much more of like a small scale. The partner can help with them in an IoT implementation, and they have their own environments in that domain. So there is a challenge, but there are ways to actually get there. And we get it that not all organizations are structured that way, but you can enable data mesh by doing this.
Awesome, great stuff. And Pete Hine, from your side, the thing, what are the key challenges you see using a data mesh structure versus a more centralized approach?
Data domain ownership. So teams really need to be and feel accountable for their data. Also creating a proper data product, I feel, is quite difficult. So in the previous or in the centralized model, we had lots of data engineers closely working together. They designed the data warehousing environment or data lake environment quite well, but now suddenly you go distributed. So you need to give your teams proper guidance. Also, you need to set standards on interoperability to avoid data distribution really becomes a mess, because if each team decides for its own standard, then integration, distribution of data becomes quite difficult. So it's a tough challenge, I see, and you need to guide it, I think, also quite properly. And therefore, you should also slowly start. So do not.
Awesome, great, good stuff. And Namrata, I'm going to come back to you, because that change that we've got going through with various different customers in APAC is a great question. In moving towards data mesh, how does it look like resources within the organization? So have you got any insight to how customers are changing any of that on the resource, or I can go elsewhere, as it were?
In terms of the resources that are working on it, that is
Yes,
centralized. Okay, so this is exactly where the expertise, so that is required in each of the domains, and that's a little bit of a challenge in convincing the different stakeholders, because all this while there was a centralized team that had all the expertise in terms of technical knowledge, but then now each of the domains need to have the technical knowledge as well. So that is a bit of consideration to have in terms of the resources.
Awesome, excellent. And Pete Hine, from the stuff that you've got going on in Western Europe, how are you seeing organizations change? Are they having to change?
It's a good question. It's difficult. I see it's mostly a cultural change rather than a technology change. So you need to think quite well along of your data strategy and how to move forward. It's a longer term transition, not something that happens overnight. It's
Awesome.
the people, the skills, like I think, Mike, you said that as well in the beginning. So, or in the keynote we heard, well, people skilling is really important.
Yeah, good. I think it's a great one. Thanks for that, Pete Hine. Great one for Emerson that's just come in. And I say this because we talk about it offline quite often. How do you fix and avoid data silos issues that a traditional data warehouse tried to fix? Different teams doing their own data engineering might have different numbers, and how do you avoid the business losing confidence in data? And I think we were talking about it the other day about kind of management pieces, but I'll let you lead that conversation on from there.
Absolutely. So data silos, they become silos because you cannot find them. It's kind of like confined to different places. That's why foundational is that data governance, being able to build that catalog so that you can see data across the organizations. So a lot of that is having all that data in that one layer, that governance, so that data is discoverable. Data, you can get more context about data, metadata, business glossary, business terms, all of that. It is foundational. The second piece to that is to avoid the silos is having that unified data storage, if you will, right? Making sure that the technology is there. We got the data lake house. That's great. That reduces a lot of that silos, because now data can be accessed from the lake. But how do you kind of enable now, for example, using some of the data coming from SQL databases? You can find them in the catalog, but how can I get access to it, right? Which is, using, for example, the Python example where you can request access to that data. By doing this request or these services, you're kind of like eliminating the roadblocks to get access to the data that you didn't have, you didn't know before, and you didn't have access. So we go beyond that so that you are actually democratizing that data. Hopefully that provides some context. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that input. I'm just going through the questions there. They are coming in fast and furious. I'm trying to pick it. So, open book on this one. Whoever wants to answer this. My client's CDOs has several questions regarding how to implement and automate in Azure data quality controls, rules in their ownership, stewardess on the control plane. Is it possible in Purview? And I know Pete. So open to Emerson, Pete, Hein, and Rata. Whoever wants to jump in, because I know you've all had expertise in this area.
Peter, you want to go first?
Yeah, I know changes will come, so I don't know how much I can say on this, but Purview will definitely play a role in that part. In that respect, I also see companies, they develop their own metadata framework, and data quality often then is part of that framework. So when data is moved across different domains, data quality controls kick in, data is scanned for data quality, and the results are feed it back to, for example, central metadata store, or you could even think of Purview where you store the actual data quality results within. Maybe Emerson, something, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge that we have here is we are in a public event. But if you're an organization, please reach out to us. We have under NDA, we can share the roadmaps that we have when it comes to Purview. But I would like to give the comfort that, yes, a lot of these things that we're talking about, this is not the stop for it. There's a lot of innovations that we're putting in, not just on the Azure Synapse, the Data Lake, the Purview altogether, Power BI as well. So please reach out to us. We'll be able to kind of share more. But the answer is yes, it's going to get easier, a lot easier, Apple, in the future.
Awesome stuff. Thank you both of you. Sometimes customers are not sure what could be the different data products for their domains. Is there a recommendation way to define a data product for an industry, some shared services and domains? So Narata, I'm going to just maybe look to you. When you were working with the APAC customers, how did you approach that kind of looking at the data applications, data products?
It was use case by use case. So that's how we picked up each of the use cases. A lot of data sets were involved there, and then that was arrived at as a data product, one particular use case. So that's one of the approaches where anything that is reusable, used by multiple other domains, could be a data product. Say like a financial statement, for example. That's one of the examples I can think of. But then, yes, you'd have to follow an approach there to define the data products. It could be use case by use case as well.
And to Pete Hein, one of the things that we've had a chat about multiple times is, look, it looks like a real big bang approach that I have to go and do this, but increasingly coming out of the of the piece. And interesting, I've just seen that Jonathan's posted that it looks very daunting to go and deploy a data management landing zone and data landing zone, but we've put together kind of a starting checklist, haven't we, about where to start. And I wondered whether you could just expand on that, just to give reassurance that you don't have to go for big bang to start off with. We can start small.
Absolutely. So I think on the Microsoft Docs page now you will find best practices and guidance also for this. But typical approach would be to start small with one single data management landing zone, one data landing zone, then and maybe with one first or two domains, and look at the data product creation first, create that end-to-end pipeline or use case, and see how that works in practice, and then what kind of principles you need to add and how to continue further. That would be my best practice.
Excellent. And Emerson, when you're talking to the CDOs and to chief data officers, so I'm using acronyms, terrible. Chief data officers and the chief information officers and the chief CTOs, what are their kind of passions when they see where we're going compared to their concerns? So.
Right. So the concerns that they have is around how do we create data agility, because everyone wants to build insights, but the data is not ready, it's not clean. And that's why we responded by building this automated data operations, right? That's one of the concerns that they would like to implement. The second one is how to kind of have this unified ecosystem, because in everyone's mind right now, there is the data warehousing solution, there's machine learning, there's IoT. But as an organization, you shouldn't be really thinking about your solutions as siloed solutions, that you have an IoT for real-time streaming. It should be all unified, if you will. So those are the things that we are trying to kind of create here as part of the North Star that we're providing, right? Create the domain, so we're focusing on the data consumption, focusing on the business needs, focus on the data products. The data products would, in a lot of domains, becomes very, very obvious. And we can provide more examples on that. Reach out to us further. We have some kind of examples that we're going to be releasing on retail, potentially with other industries, but happy to kind of think about how we think about building the data products from the different organizations. And yeah, that's what I have for now.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks, Emerson. Thank you both. So final question, and then we'll conclude. So it's come up repeatedly, actually, in a number of the pieces. One is along the lines of it's about the dev test kind of product question. So how do you handle dev test prod in a data mesh environment? Who wishes to take that one?
I don't see personally any difference, like today's environment. So I would expect so. Also in your current situation, there would be a dev test and also production scenario and these different phases. So yeah, how would it look different in data mesh? Maybe it's more decentral, and I think the flexibility there and the difference you would see is different teams have different heartbeats, so they could follow their own rhythm in how they develop things and move things into production and how they deploy data products, for instance. So to me, that's maybe the only difference I see. But maybe to you, Emerson, do you see?
It's the same. Like, if you think about it, we are following the same practices, implementations, what have you. We are federating, right? That's the difference that we're taking. We don't have a monolithic implementation. We are federating to the multiple domains. We are adding governance on top of that, or we should have a governance on top of that. So all of that foundational implementation, maybe DevOps, governance, what have you, it's still the same implementation as if you have a monolithic implementation, as an example.
Yeah, great. So before we close, I just want to give the three of you just 30 seconds, just in case we've missed anything out in the world that we should make a point of. So, Narasa, is there anything that you would close with, or some thoughts that you would give as highlights to our audience today?
I think the domain identification is one, and start small. That's one, which I have always seen with the customers. They're very concerned about starting with multiple subscription per domain. So start small with a single subscription, plan out with one domain at a time, and then move forward as it goes.
Great. Emerson.
Yeah, I think for me, focus on the business problems. Right? If it's very specific to a line of business, what I find is, like marketing, for example, they're the prominent ones that can start with this domain, start enabling them. Don't overthink data mesh, because it is a concept where you are federating. Tackle it, like to Namrata's point, is start with one domain, two domains that make sense. I have clients, for example, who has a big project and it makes sense to have their own domains. Maybe that's a good start. Right? Focus on that domain and start kind of growing from there. It's not an overnight kind of evolution from monolithic to a federated implementation, but I see a lot of success and agility for our clients who are actually doing that. That's all I can say for now.
Super. Pete Hein, in 20 seconds.
20 seconds. Look at the Azure Docs. There's so much wisdom. We launched a whole bunch of new documents on data domains, master data management, data marketplace, data products, self-serve data platforms, these different topologies like Aspen and I discussed. There's so much more you can find. So look at the Azure Docs.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, this morning, this evening, wherever you are in the world. We value very much you put in the time in to come and watch the sessions today. And more so, participate in questioning. It helps us grow the product. Until next time, thank you very much.